Okay, I want you to picture this. A guy is standing out in this totally dusty, remote slot canyon in the American Southwest.
Right, out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. And it is actually his 28th birthday. He's brought a television crew with him, which, is unusual enough on its own.
Definitely a weird way to spend a birthday.
Totally. But the reason he's there is what really makes you pause. He reaches into this container and he starts to scatter cremated ashes across the canyon floor.
Wow, okay.
But these aren't, they aren't the ashes of a parent or a spouse or like a beloved pet. They are the ashes of his own severed right arm.
Which is just a profoundly jarring image. I mean,
Yeah.
we usually associate scattering ashes with mourning, right? With
Sure.
saying a final goodbye to a separate human life.
Right.
You don't typically leave a piece of your own physical body in the exact geographical location where that landscape, actively tried to kill you.
Exactly. And if you are listening to this, you almost certainly know who we are talking about. You know Aaron Ralston as like the guy who cut off his arm.
Yeah, the movie 127 Hours. Everyone knows that basic story.
Right. It's one of the most famous survival stories of the 21st century. But today, we are taking a deep dive into the full scope of this story because the amputation is really just the midpoint.
It is. It's just one part of a much larger psychological puzzle.
Yeah, and so the mission of this deep dive is to explore his entire narrative. We've pulled together a stack of sources, his own memoir, some really detailed medical analyses of severe trauma, and extensive interviews with extreme sports psychologists.
Oh, that's great. Those psychological sources are so key here.
They really are. We want to understand the intense, almost blinding ambition that led him into that canyon, the astonishing mental pivot that allowed him to escape it, and the incredibly messy psychological aftermath of surviving the unsurvivable.
Because surviving an ordeal of that magnitude, it isn't some magical cure for a person's flaws. It doesn't just instantly turn you into a fully actualized, enlightened human being.
Right, like we always see in the movies.
Exactly. Often, the survival instinct just magnifies the extreme traits that put you in danger in the very first place.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand the canyon, we have to rewind and look at who Aaron was before that rock fell.
Right. His background is super important.
Yeah, so he was born in 1975 in Ohio, but his family moved to Denver when he was 12. And that relocation is critical because it's where he gets his first real taste for the outdoors.
Colorado will do that to you.
Oh, for sure. He gets into skiing, backpacking, just exploring the Rockies. But he wasn't just a standard adrenaline junkie. He was a deeply intellectual, analytical guy.
He was incredibly smart, yeah.
He ends up going to Carnegie Mellon University, and he doesn't take the easy route at all. He double majors in mechanical engineering and French, while also minoring in piano.
What's fascinating here is the specific combination of those disciplines. I mean, mechanical engineering requires a brain that intuitively understands systems, right? Forces, load-bearing capacities, variables.
Yeah, a very math-heavy, structured way of thinking.
Exactly. And then French and piano, on the other hand, point to a dedicated, highly disciplined mind that values complex patterns and really rigorous practice.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, he is someone who learns the strict rules of complex systems so he can ultimately master them. He approaches life as an equation that can be solved if you just have, enough data and enough discipline.
And he takes that exact engineering brain right into the corporate world. He gets a job at Intel, working as a mechanical engineer in places like Arizona and New Mexico.
Dealing with microprocessors, right?
Yep. He spends 5 years there managing these microscopic variables in highly controlled, completely sterilized environments. But he is just burning out.
I can imagine. It's the total opposite of the wilderness.
Completely.
Yeah.
The corporate structure, the cubicle life, the predictability, it's suffocating him. He's spending all his free time out climbing, and eventually in 2002, he just unplugs completely.
He just walks away from it all.
He quits Intel to go climb Denali, moves to Aspen, Colorado, and just decides he is going to dedicate his life to climbing mountains full-time.
It is a classic search for authenticity, but with a really dangerous twist. I mean, he swaps the entirely predictable, controllable environment of a microprocessor facility for the ultimate uncontrollable environment.
High-altitude nature.
Exactly. But he brings that engineer's confidence with him. When you are highly intelligent and highly capable, it is remarkably easy to convince yourself that you can calculate and manage the risks of the natural world, just like you would a mechanical system.
Like nature is just a puzzle to solve.
Yeah, you start to believe that nature is just another equation you can crack.
But nature actually tried to warn him that his calculations were completely off. And this is a detail from our sources that totally recontextualized his story for me.
Oh yeah, the avalanche.
Yes. Just a few months before his famous canyon accident in early 2003, he is skiing with two friends on Resolution Peak in Colorado, and they get caught in a massive grade 5 avalanche.
We really need to be clear about what a grade 5 avalanche actually is. It isn't just, a heavy snowslide.
Right, it sounds like a ski resort hazard, but it's not.
Not at all. A grade 5 is the highest, most catastrophic classification. We're talking about millions of tons of mass moving at highway speeds.
That is terrifying.
The kinetic energy involved is unimaginable. It is enough to literally gouge out the side of a mountain, destroy mature forests, and bury entire landscapes under dozens of feet of concrete hard snow.
And miraculously, nobody is killed. But his two friends who survived this horrific landscape-altering event with him afterward, they completely cut ties with him.
They were just done.
Yeah, they stopped speaking to him entirely as this massive flashing red check engine light on the dashboard of his life.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like the universe screaming, your risk tolerance is way too high. You are a danger to yourself and others. But he doesn't change course at all.
And the psychology of the extreme adventurer explains why he ignored that warning. In that mindset, the feedback loop gets corrupted.
How so?
Well, when you survive a grade 5 avalanche, the logical, healthy takeaway should be, I pushed it too far, I made a severe miscalculation.
Right, time to dial it back.
But for a certain type of high-achieving, systems-oriented mind, the takeaway morphs into, I went to the absolute fatal edge and I survived. My systems work, my calculations held.
Oh, wow. So he felt validated by it.
Exactly. The survival reinforces the dangerous behavior. Even losing his friends didn't fully recalibrate his approach to risk.
And that exact refusal to recalibrate is what puts him in a remote canyon in Utah just 2 months later, completely off the grid. April 26, 2003.
Blue John Canyon.
Yeah. He is solo canyoneering in Blue John Canyon. It's a slot canyon, meaning he's navigating a space carved by water over millennia, sometimes only a few feet wide.
Very tight, very technical terrain.
Right. And as he's descending, he puts his weight on a suspended boulder. The rock dislodges, it smashes his left hand, and then completely crushes his right hand against the canyon wall, pinning his wrist under 800 pounds of sandstone.
And instantly, all of his engineering brilliance, all of his fitness, and all of his preparation are rendered completely moot by a single catastrophic oversight.
Wait, I have to stop you right there, because I can understand pushing boundaries, but this guy is an Intel engineer.
I know where you're going with this.
His entire professional background is based on risk management, redundancy, and planning for variables. How does someone whose brain is literally wired for systems analysis just vanish into the desert without leaving a basic hiking itinerary with anyone?
It defies logic.
It really does. He didn't tell a roommate, a friend, or a park ranger. He didn't have a phone. That doesn't sound like hubris. It sounds completely irrational.
It seems completely irrational from the safety of our perspective, for sure, but you have to look at it through the lens of extreme self-reliance.
Okay, tell me more about that.
The exact psychological trait you need to summit a frozen mountain alone in the dead of winter is supreme, absolute independence. You have to believe you are your own best rescue party.
Because no one else is coming up there to get you.
Right. Over time, that profound strength becomes a fatal blind spot. Leaving a note or telling someone where you are going is a subtle admission of vulnerability.
Like admitting you might actually fail.
Exactly. It is acknowledging that you might need external help. For a fiercely independent climber who just walked away from corporate society to live strictly on his own terms, leaving an itinerary probably felt like a bureaucratic tether he was actively trying to escape.
So the result of that extreme independence is that he is now utterly alone, trapped by an 800-pound chalkstone, and his supplies are just grim.
They're basically non-existent.
He has about 12 ounces of water left. If you think about a standard soda can, that is his total water supply for the rest of his natural life. And he has 2 burritos.
That's it for days.
Yeah. For the first few days, he tries to chip away at the rock. He tries to rig a complex rope and pulley system using his climbing gear.
Yeah.
But the boulder isn't moving a single millimeter.
And this is where the physical reality of his equipment becomes an absolute nightmare. I mean, he didn't even bring a high-quality survival knife.
Ugh. The details of his gear are so frustrating. He later described his multi-tool as the kind of cheap freebie you'd get if you bought a $15 flashlight at a hardware store.
The worst possible tool for the worst possible situation?
It had a dull 2-inch blade made of low-quality metal. By day 4, realizing nobody is coming, He knows he has to separate himself from the arm.
Well, he knows what needs to be done.
Yeah, so he starts making exploratory cuts on his forearm, experimenting with makeshift tourniquets. But he hits a literal biological wall. The cheap metal of that dull knife simply cannot cut through the dense calcium of human bone.
It is the ultimate physical despair. The logic of his situation is undeniable. At this point, he will die in that spot.
Because he can't get through the bone.
Exactly. His water is gone. He is dehydrating rapidly in the arid desert climate. The body's systems are beginning a cascading shutdown.
By the 5th day, he is completely out of food and water. He resorts to drinking his own urine to try to salvage any hydration at all.
Which is a desperate final measure.
He is so certain this is the end that he uses his cheap knife to carve his name, his date of birth, and his presumed date of death into the sandstone wall right beside him.
Writing his own epitaph.
Yeah. He pulls out his video camera and records goodbye messages to his family, detailing how his belongings should be distributed. He wraps himself up in his climbing ropes to try and survive the freezing cold desert night, fully expecting his heart to stop before sunrise.
He had accepted it.
He had. And that is when his mind breaks from reality. He begins hallucinating.
But the hallucination he experiences isn't just a random, chaotic firing of a dying brain. It is highly specific, deeply profound, and ultimately it's life-saving.
In this vision, he sees a little boy. He hallucinates himself in the future, playing with a child. And as he reaches down to scoop this boy up, he notices that he is missing part of his right arm.
That detail is incredible.
He later credits this exact vision with giving him the absolute unshakable conviction that he was going to survive. It was like his subconscious recognized the body was giving up, so it threw him a psychological lifeline.
The intersection of the biological will to live and the human capacity for hope is just incredibly powerful here. The body was actively failing, shutting down non-essential systems.
Right.
But the brain manufactured a future that explicitly required him to survive. It gave him a narrative that extended beyond the walls of the canyon, and it presented his amputation not as a loss, but as a necessary condition for that future to exist.
And then the sun comes up on day 6. He wakes up. He realizes that due to the total lack of circulation for almost a week, his trapped hand and forearm have begun to decompose.
Necrosis is setting in.
Yeah, and he feels this overwhelming, desperate, almost feral urge to just tear it off. And this is the moment his background suddenly saves his life, the epiphany.
The shift in his thinking.
Right. For 5 days, he has been looking at his arm as a piece of biology that needs to be surgically cut, but suddenly, the Intel engineer takes over. He starts looking at his arm as a mechanical physics problem.
Precisely. He transforms his own flesh and bone into an equation of force and leverage. If the metallurgy of the blade cannot overcome the density of the bone, he realizes he doesn't need a blade to separate the structure.
He needs to break it.
Right. He needs leverage. He needs torque.
He essentially had to reverse engineer his own body. He had to treat his arm the way a mechanic would treat a failed strut on a machine. He uses the 800-pound boulder that is killing him as an anvil.
It's brilliant but horrifying.
By throwing his body weight in specific directions, he uses his own frame as a lever to generate an immense amount of torque. He torques his body against his trapped arm with enough force to literally snap the structural support, breaking his own radius and ulna bones.
And once the structural integrity of the bone is completely compromised, the cheap multi-tool only has to do the soft tissue work.
Yeah.
The muscle, the skin, the nerves.
Which still takes an agonizing, excruciating hour to complete.
I can't even fathom the pain.
He uses a tube from his camelback water reservoir, threading it tightly as a tourniquet. He has to use the blunt pliers on the multi-tool to tear through the tougher tendons that the dull blade won't pierce.
Using pliers. That's just wow.
And in a stroke of absolute chilling presence of mind, he intentionally leaves the major blood vessels for the very end, knowing that once those arteries are severed, he is on a ticking clock.
The discipline required to manage your own traumatic amputation step by step, while severely dehydrated, malnourished, and in profound shock, is almost beyond comprehension.
It's superhuman.
He was effectively acting as his own trauma surgeon, using, pocket tools.
He finally separates himself, but he is far from safe. He has to climb out of the slot canyon one-handed while bleeding. He has to rig a rope and rappel down a 65-foot sheer cliff wall.
Still entirely on his own.
Yeah, and then he starts hiking out into the open desert heat. He's 8 miles from his car, no phone, no beacon. But after hiking 6 miles, a miracle happens.
The family.
He runs into a family on vacation from the Netherlands. They give him water, they alert the authorities, and a rescue helicopter is dispatched to pick him up.
We really need to pause here. and emphasized the incredibly tight physiological margins of this survival.
Oh,
Let's talk about his blood volume and dehydration.
okay. Lay it on me.
Because he had been trapped for 6 days without water, he was profoundly dehydrated. His blood had severely thickened, and his blood pressure had plummeted.
So his heart wasn't pumping as hard.
Right. Medical professionals later noted that his timing was chillingly perfect. If he had somehow managed to amputate his arm on day 2 or 3 when he was fully hydrated and his heart was pumping normally,
Oh, I see where you're going.
yeah, cutting those arteries would have resulted in rapid exsanguination. He would have bled out in minutes. His severe physical misery actually prepared his body to survive the amputation.
That is unbelievable.
But if he had waited even 12 more hours, his organs would have completely failed and he would have died in the trap.
He threaded an impossible physiological needle. So he is rescued. The boulder is eventually moved by 13 men using a winch and a hydraulic jack just to retrieve the severed hand and arm, which are cremated, leading to that surreal birthday ash scattering we talked about at the beginning.
Bringing it full circle.
So what does this all mean? If this were a standard Hollywood script, this is where the credits roll. Triumphant music swells, he survives, he learns his lesson about hubris, and he becomes a perfectly enlightened, humble guru.
But real life doesn't work like that.
Exactly. Our sources show that human reality is so much messier than a movie ending.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of trauma recovery, we see that surviving a near-death experience doesn't instantly resolve your internal conflicts. For Ralston, the immediate aftermath wasn't quiet reflection. It was a massive, overwhelming wave of external validation.
It was a total media frenzy. He's sitting on the couch with David Letterman. He's named GQ Survivor of the Year. Vanity Fair highlights him. He writes a massive best-selling memoir.
And eventually the Danny Boyle film.
Yeah, the Oscar-nominated film, 127 Hours. He is a global hero, celebrated specifically for his toughness, and physically his comeback is unbelievable.
It really is.
By 2005, just 2 years after cutting off his own arm, he becomes the first person to climb all 59 of Colorado's 14ers, peaks over 14,000 feet solo, in winter.
Which is an insane achievement.
He's climbing in Chile and Argentina. He's advising extreme polar expeditions. From the outside, he looks completely unstoppable.
But that is exactly the psychological trap. He felt unstoppable. He admitted later that surviving the canyon did not make him humble. Initially, it gave him a dangerous invincibility complex.
He thought he couldn't die.
Think about the dopamine and adrenaline baselines in a human brain. When you confront absolute certain death and you defeat it by breaking your own bones, your baseline gets completely warped.
So everyday stuff just doesn't register anymore.
Exactly. Normal life feels numb. So how do you find meaning on a quiet Tuesday afternoon? You can't. He didn't seek out harsher winters and higher mountains because he was cured. He sought them out because extreme risk was the only way he could feel anything.
Oh.
He had literally defeated death, so he assumed he was bulletproof.
But eventually, gravity always catches up. In 2006, the high of the survival wears off and he crashes hard. He goes through a tough romantic breakup. Tragically, he loses close friends to suicide.
It all hits him at once.
And this guy who fought so unimaginably hard to live for 6 days in that canyon falls into a deep, dark depression. He realizes that he had tied his entire sense of self-esteem to extreme adventure-seeking and defying death.
True recovery for him wasn't the physical act of escaping the canyon. The amputation was just biology. The real survival story was the years-long psychological process of learning how to live an ordinary life again.
He had to find a new baseline.
Right. He had to consciously decouple his self-worth from risk. He had to learn that he didn't need to stare death in the face or perform superhuman feats of endurance just to feel valuable as a human being.
And he does eventually find a sustainable path forward. He marries. He has a daughter and later a son, mirroring that very hallucination that saved his life in the canyon.
Which is just a beautiful outcome.
It is. He finds a stable, lucrative career as a corporate speaker, sharing his story with the world. He had some bumps in the road, including a brief domestic dispute that was quickly cleared and dismissed, but ultimately he steps away from the edge of the cliff.
He learns to just be.
He stops trying to outrun his own mortality.
It forces us to entirely reevaluate what strength really looks like. The mechanical, analytical mind that allowed him to snap his own bones and perform field surgery is incredible. It's a triumph of biology and will.
Absolutely.
But the emotional mind that eventually allowed him to stop seeking out danger, to accept a quiet life without the constant adrenaline rush, that might actually be the greater, more difficult achievement.
It really makes you think about the nature of our defining moments. Aaron Ralston's story is the ultimate testament to human endurance, the terrifying power of a hyperlogical mind, and the deep, often hidden complexities of trauma recovery.
It's a story that stays with you.
It really does. But I want to leave you with the final thought to mull over long after this audio stops playing. If the defining moment of your life, the single event the entire world will forever associate you with, happens over a span of 5 days when you are just 27 years old.
Yeah, what do you do next?
Exactly. How do you navigate the rest of your life? Do you spend your remaining decades trying to top that moment with even greater extremes? Or do you spend them trying to escape its shadow?
It's a heavy question.
Finding the balance between the two might be the hardest trail he ever had to navigate. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. We will catch you next time.